And we'll speak to the health department a little bit later, but just to tell you right now, there is an outbreak of yet another illness in South Africa, that of diarrheal disease, a gastrointestinal infection. The health department is appealing to the public to take extra precautions and maintain proper hygiene. Diarrheal disease is a common and often highly infectious condition that affects the stomach and intestines. The symptoms include diarrhea, cramps, nausea, vomiting, and a low-grade fever. It is a leading cause of child mortality and morbidity in the world and mostly spreads by contact with an infected person or through contaminated food and drinking water. 50 people in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria, have been treated at the Jubilee Hospital. 6 patients have lost their lives. The department has also confirmed cholera cases have now risen to 22, with 4 more cases in Gauteng and 7 in the Free State. Now, Forestry, Fisheries and Environmental Minister Barbara Creecy has declined to comment on developments regarding Karpowership, saying it would compromise her role as the appeal authority. This follows the news that the Transport Department has approved the Turkish company Karpowership's application to access the ports of Ngqura, Richards Bay and Saldanha Bay for the next 20 years. Karpowership intends to generate power on its floating gas ships and feed that power into the electricity grid. But the deal is facing opposition from environmental groups. Let's take a look and then we'll speak to OUTA.
The decision to grant Karpowership access to South Africa's ports before it's even secured environmental authorization is shocking.
Wading into muddy waters. The Transport Department's announcement on its approval of port docking for 3 of Karpowership's vessels has landed them square in the storm of controversy, with environmental groups demanding answers.
And the fact that this was decided on the 26th of February yet never publicly disclosed is ludicrous. The fossil fuel industry thrives off of deception and it thrives also off of secrecy. And in this instance, they're using our power crisis and our desperation for access to energy to lock us into a project that'll be bad for the economy.
If you look at the small print, it says that, in fact, this is not a decision to go ahead. This is simply to say that providing all the necessary approvals are in place, they will be able to moor at the port. So far, the environmental approvals have failed, not once, but in terms of Ngqura also twice. And the generation license is also under review.
In a written statement, the Transport Minister says the approval is in line with the National Ports Act number 12 of 2005, which gives the Transport Ministry powers to approve such applications. However, the approval depends on whether Karpowership will get concurrent approvals from the Department of Environment and Energy Regulator, NERSA. Environment Minister Barbara Creecy was cagey to respond.
Linda, I have indicated to you that I'm the appeal authority and I don't wish to discuss this matter in this meeting because it compromises my ability to be objective. The question of the costs is a matter which would rest in the domain of Minister Mantashe.
Creecy said all processes would be done in a fair manner.
There is a mitigation hierarchy, which is what the environmental impact assessment represents. That environmental impact assessment is managed in an objective manner, no matter who is the applicant. I think the concerns that Cabinet would have, and this is why I would have spoken about our attempts to cut red tape, that would be the concern that Cabinet would have.
Environmental groups say the lack of transparency around the Karpowership issue is concerning.
We are still a very, very long way away from these power ships generating any electricity to help us with our energy crisis in South Africa. This move and clarification from the Department of Transport seems indicative of the way that Karpowership and government have been acting around this whole debacle in trying to bring Karpowerships to South Africa.
Karpowership has been mired in controversy since it was announced as the preferred bidder in March 2021 to supply 1,220 megawatts of electricity to the national grid for 20 years at an estimated cost of 200 billion rand. Nozintombi Mia, SABC News.
Well, the Organisation for Undoing Tax Abuse, or OUTA, again saying the Karpowership deal is not good for the South African economy. To discuss, we're joined by OUTA's CEO, Wayne Duvenage. Wayne, thank you for being with us. What do you think of the Transport Department approving the mooring rights?
Well, as we heard in the excerpts, this is just one element of the process. Unless there is authority from the ports, of which fall under the Department of Transport, for the ships to dock in our harbours, then they won't be able to do so. So it's one of the steps. The environmental approvals still have to happen. But more than that, we are in court to review the decision by NERSA to grant them a license ahead of the fact that they hadn't even got their environmental approvals. You know, NERSA should be looking after our interests as citizens in the country and not racing ahead to approve a decision of this nature and grant licenses without due process being followed. The biggest issue, though, and concern we have is that this 220 billion rand estimate was pre the Ukraine war. The rand has tanked by 35% since then, since the 2021 decision. And price of gas, liquid natural gas, has gone up nearly threefold, from $5 to $15 per 1,000 cubic feet. It's come back down to 10, but that is still double what it was. And we're at the mercy of the fluctuation of the rand, as well as liquid natural gas prices. So it's going to be probably will definitely be the most expensive by far source of energy if it ever does go ahead.
Okay, so the cost is your primary concern, but then you have to factor in what would the cost be of alternatives, perhaps coming from South Africa, but we also have to consider the urgency here.
Yeah. No, look, there's no doubting we are in a crisis, and we're not opposing solutions, but you don't hit a drawing pin into a block of wood with a sledgehammer. And that's what they're trying to do here. This is going to be worse for the economy. Everybody thinks, well, if the Karpowerships comes in, load shedding is over. It's not. Karpowerships will deal with one stage of load shedding, 1 to 1.5 stages maximum. So it doesn't deal with the issue. I think our biggest problem with government is that for the last 5 years, if they had have gone ahead with all the renewable options that were put on the table, we wouldn't have load shedding today as we sit here. So that's the serious issue. They've got a plan. They've got to fix up and make sure that the sabotage that is taking place and bringing down the performance of the 6 major long-term power plants that we have, fix up Kusuli's 3 units that have gone down from the chimney collapse, fix up Medupi's boiler, and bring on the Koeberg 2 units. Now, those are all going to happen in the next year to 18 months. You must also understand that Karpowerships is not a case of the ship docking tomorrow and electricity flows. It's going to take over a year before anything happens, if the decision and go ahead is given today. So this is the worst decision we could be considering. And you know, when decisions are so irrational, Francis, they're either shrouded in corruption or incompetence. And we believe this is not in the best interest of the country, and there's something at stake here.
Well, can you explain, because we heard a commentator in that excerpt saying that government has created the urgency with an ulterior motive. And it's often stated, but that is a serious claim. Do you believe that?
Yeah, we do, because, this is not about incompetence. If you look at the modeling that we have in South Africa, we have to update our integrated resource plan, which was last done in 2019. But without a plan, what we have is various ministers shooting from the hip. So you have Kosiyenso Ramokgopa wanting to extend the life of power plants that are supposed to be phased out. We hear of so many different options that are being considered, and now suddenly Karpowerships comes to the fore. We need to work to a plan. We need to understand the rationality, the figures, the numbers. I mean, when we hear the ministers saying, okay, well, 20 years, 20 years for a 3-year issue. is a big problem for this country. It's like, it's a noose around our neck for 20 years, which we estimate after the fact that the price has gone up on gas and the rand has weakened, that we're going well over 500 billion rand, not 220 billion rand. Now, if you want to shorten that period from 20 years to 10 years, and some ministers are saying, well, we might have to shorten the period. Well, to what? To 15, to 10, to 5, and what are the cost implications? So there's no clarity, there's no certainty around what's happening here, where the costs, how do they arrive at these figures? So, of course, when it's shrouded in so much smoke and mirrors, and we have a crisis to deal with, you cannot just force a grossly irrational scheme into being. That's where we have to speculate that corruption is behind this decision.
All right, so you say you're fighting this in court. I mean, when do you expect that to play out in some sort of decision?
Well, we were hoping that this would have been done by now. It was over a year ago that we filed our papers to review the decision by NERSA. And for the last year, between NERSA and Karpowerships, they have done everything in their power not to give us the information that we are rightful and rightly allowed to or should be able to obtain from them. So if you don't want to give us the information, if you don't want to be transparent, well, again, then we must have to speculate that there's something wrong here. And it's not secret information. It's not information that jeopardizes competitive nature of a Karpowerships deal at all. We want to know from NERSA, how did they arrive at the decision? And we're going to get the courts to review that decision. And that's been going on for over a year, as we're saying. We should have been in court already, having this argument, having these discussions, but they have delayed it because they refuse to give us the information that we require. So, the rat starts getting very smelly.
All right, we'll follow that. Thank you very much, OUTA's CEO, Wayne Duvernage. And of course, the environmental decisions, Karpowership already failing in the instances regarding all the ports to get environmental approval thus far.